those among us who do not know him well enough, let me share with you some highlights of his life. He came from Luok, Romblon, having been born there on 9 January 1947. He came from a family of Navy men. His father was a retired Philippine Navy captain. His younger brother was the former flag officer in command of the Philippine Navy. A cousin of his who happened to have graduated from our alma mater with class 1965, our class, was also a retired Navy man. A product of public schools, he entered the Philippine Military Academy, where as a plebe, he was chosen to study at the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, USA, where he graduated in 1970. At Annapolis, he distinguished himself both in academics and in sports. He was consistently in the superintendent's honor list. He was also for 4 straight years the brigade boxing champion, the first midshipman to achieve this feat since 1845. Or 145 years. Thus far, there are only 14 midshipmen in the United States Naval Academy to have held this distinct honor. So, huwag kayong magbiro-biro sa kanya pag naman. He has the potential of a Pacman. Unfortunately, he pursued public service. He is a qualified parachutist, having undergone airborne training in Fort Benning, Georgia, and advanced airborne training at the U.S. Marine Corps Base, Little Creek, Virginia, USA, where he received the U.S. Navy Marine Corps Gold Wing. He had undergone crisis management course at the Emergency Planning College of the United Kingdom. He graduated as a company commander, quite a high position among the Corps of Midshipmen, notwithstanding his being a foreigner, with a Bachelor of Science degree, major in mathematics and operations analysis. After Annapolis, he took up Masters in Business Administration in UP, where he graduated at the top of his class. After 14 years of service in the Philippine Navy, he got out with the rank of captain and found himself serving the government as Postmaster General of the Philippines. For his outstanding job thereat, he was awarded the prestigious TOYN, or 10 Outstanding Young Men Award for Excellence in Public Service. This was followed by the Cavalier Award in 1984. After 2 tours, totaling 4 years, he ran for congressman of the 2nd District of Parañaque. In position, he won by landslide, not only in 1992, but also in 1995, 1998, 2004, 2007, and 2010 elections, earning for himself the title Landslide King of Parañaque. In between, he served as the Philippine National Security Advisor from 2001 to 2004. In his 18 years service as a congressman, he had a record of perfect attendance in all sessions of Congress. He consistently received the one of the most outstanding congressmen in the Philippines award. Among the many landmark laws that he authored are the following: Republic Act 8185, establishing the Local Government Calamity Fund; Republic Act 8551, the PNP Reform and Reorganization Act of 1996; Republic Act 9729, the Climate Change Act of 2009; Republic Act 9851 on crimes against humanitarian law, genocide, and crimes against humanity; Republic Act 10530, Red Cross and Other Emblems Act; Republic Act 10575, the Bureau of Corrections Act; Republic Act 9040, the AAP Tax Exemption for Paying Allowance Act; Republic Act 9993, Philippine Coast Guard Law, among others. He was also credited for the construction of the most number of school buildings in the history of Parañaque, construction with the most number of covered courts in the Philippines, and for the implementation of the biggest flood control program in the city's history. In Congress, he served, among others, as Chairman of the Committee on Public Order and Security, Chairman of the Committee on National Defense, Deputy Minority Leader, and Vice Chairman of the Commission on Appointments. Outside of Congress, he had also served as Governor of the Philippine National Red Cross for 20 years, where he received the Biennial Red Cross Gold Medal Award for bravery and heroism in the face of hostile enemy fire, while leading a Red Cross rescue team that rescued wounded soldiers during the bloody December 1989 attempt. He also served for 1 year as National President of the Boy Scouts of the Philippines, for 2 years as Fund Campaign Chairman of the Philippine Cancer Society, 4 years as Division Fund Campaign Chairman of the Philippine Tuberculosis Society, 2 years as Chairman of the ELPS Cerebral Palsy Project. He served also for 28 years as a Rotarian, 2 years as President of the Amateur Boxing Association of the Philippines, 5 years as a member of the Board of Trustees, St. Luke's Medical Center, 2 years as President of the Philippine Olympic Academy, 4 years as Professor of Business Administration Program of UP, and 4 years as Professor of Management, ASEAN Institute of Management. He completed many online courses as in the following: Introduction to Global Health with the University of Copenhagen, Health for All through Primary Health Care with the Johns Hopkins University, Aids of Sustainable Development with Columbia University, Climate Change, University of Melbourne, How to Change the World with Wesleyan University. He had studied also the strategic impact of the Spratlys with regard to the Philippines, Changing Global Order with the University Leiden in Netherlands, Analyzing Global Trends for Business and Society with the University of Pennsylvania, and Fundamentals of Global Energy Business with the University of Colorado System, among others. With his broad experience, academic excellence, and long exposure to various government and non-government positions, together with his deep sense of responsibility, dedication to service, and hard-working traits, our keynote speaker this morning could very well enlighten us on our theme, Cavaliers Leading the Quest for Lasting Peace and Security. So without much ado, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Cavaliers, it is my distinct honor and privilege to present to you this morning our keynote speaker, Cavalier Jose Ruelo S. Goles of Class 1970.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cavalier Surquillo, the CEO and Chairman of the Philippine Military Academy Alumni Association Incorporated. Cavalier Arevalo, President. The other distinguished personalities, Cavalier Espejo, of course the Chief of Staff, General Katapang, Cavalier Katapang. The other distinguished personalities here, I don't wish to mention them anymore. Of course, my colleague in Congress, Secretary Baya, Cavalier Bols Gasmin. First of all, I would like to thank you for making me your keynote speaker in this very important event of the PMAAA. It is an honor and privilege made doubly more significant by the fact that I hold no official position in the government, now on my sabbatical from politics after serving for 6 terms in Congress and 3 years in the cabinet. The theme of your General Assembly and Convention is Cavaliers Leading the Quest for Lasting Peace and Security, and I'd like to focus on this theme. Your theme is always very timely, always relevant for any country, especially the Philippines is considered one of the world's emerging economies about to rise to greater heights. And I agree, the Cavaliers lead and should lead the quest for lasting peace and security. After all, Cavaliers occupy the highest positions in the defense, Army, Navy, Air Force, Police and Coast Guard establishments traditionally identified as the agencies comprising the vanguard in promoting peace and security. But of course, we all know that peace and security, especially security, pertain not only to physical or military security, but also now encompass security in the field of food, water, energy, environment, climate change. I would like to stress climate change, health, transportation, infrastructures, and many other fields, of all of which are intertwined and interdependent. In other words, a major failure in one area could result in a succession of failures in other areas, like a row of falling dominoes. Imagine, for example, how a food riot or a deadly pandemic would affect security, or how a security breakdown could affect people's health or food requirements. And I note that in all the fields I mentioned, Cavaliers are there, playing a key, crucial role, leading the way. But let me focus on the more traditional areas of peace and security, the fields of those in the uniformed services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Police, and Coast Guard. And let's look at the situation in a number of countries in our midst whose uniformed services we look at with envy. There's Japan, for example, fully devastated in the Second World War, but after only 70 years, now among the world's most powerful in terms of defense, police, and Coast Guard assets. And I'd like to show some highlights. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this. A very modest size, 170,000 active personnel. But look at the kind of assets that they have. A lot of battle tanks, 63 major battle tanks, Type 10, 341 Type 90 battle tanks, etc., etc. Other assets, infantry fighting vehicles, command and communication vehicles, light armored vehicles, armored personnel carriers, infantry mobility vehicles, and more. Nakakaingit. Look at the Navy. They have in the case of the Navy, they have this, what they call destroyers, but actually big aircraft carriers that accommodate even an F-35, the Izumo class helicopter destroyer carrier, the Hyuga class, and then the Shirani class helicopter destroyer. Submarines, and a lot of big destroyers, Aegis guided missile destroyers, Ataru class, Kongo class, Asikusi class destroyer, Takanami class destroyers, and so many other smaller destroyers. In fact, among the most powerful navies in this part of the world. But of course, nothing can beat the Japan Air Force as far as world class is concerned. On order, 42 F-35, 165 F-15, 48 F-15J, 61 F-2A and 29 F-2B made by Mitsubishi and other fighters. And of course, the police is also very world class. I'd like to highlight some of these. And then, of course, the Coast Guard, one of the best Coast Guards in the world with very large Coast Guard ships. Let's also look at South Korea. Again, devastated by Korean War, and now also among the world's most powerful in terms of defense, police, and Coast Guard assets. The South Korean Army, 495,000 strong. The Korean Army consists of 495,000 troops, 2,400 tanks, 2,700 armored fighting vehicles, 5,800 artillery pieces, 60 guided missile systems, etc., etc. And let's look at the South Korean Army, how nakakaingit tingnan yung South Korean Army. And the South Korean Navy, consisting of many modern ships, like for example, this DDG, very modern DDGs, submarines, patrol ships, and with respect to the South Korean Air Force, 39 F-15, 29 F-15K, 28 F-16 Block 32, 7 F-16 Block 32, 90 KF-16 Block 52. These are made in Korea already, F-16. 944 KF-16 fighter planes, and an order 40 F-35 from Lockheed. And with respect to the police, here's the police, world class also. The South Korean Coast Guard is also world class. And here are the samples of the South Korean Coast Guard. Now let's look at ASEAN countries. Let's look at Malaysia's Army, Navy, Air Force, Police, and Coast Guard assets. Very curiously, the Malaysian Army has a lot of anti-tank guided missiles, as you can see from this display. Anti-aircraft missiles. They have 48 main battle tanks made in Poland, light tanks made in, these are Scorpion, made in the United Kingdom, and a lot of other military vehicles. Malaysian Navy is also, they have 2 submarines. One made in, they have frigates, stealth frigates on order, French technology, but being constructed in Malaysia. They have these frigates also, corvettes, fast attack craft. And let's look at the Malaysian Air Force. They have the Sukhoi 30, 18 of them, 8 F-18, some MiG-29s, BAA Hawk. But what is most interesting about Malaysia is that I'd like to go back Malaysia Air Force today. With those Sukhoi 30s and F-18s, it's an awesome Air Force compared to what the Philippine Air Force has. But in November 1968, it was different. Look at this news clip. Headline of the news clip of the Malaysian newspaper, The Straits Times. The newspaper says, the Royal Malaysian Navy has been on round-the-clock alert since Tuesday when the KD Negri Sembilan was bussed by 2 Philippine Air Force jet fighters between Tawau and Sandakan. For your information, the KD Negri Sembilan was a Malaysian patrol ship, and the location of Sandakan is shown there in the map. Imagine, Philippine Air Force jets at that time could bust a Malaysian patrol ship near the shoreline of Sabah. And how things have changed in those days in 1968, when the SND, Cavalier Voltaire Jasmin, class of 1968, was a fresh graduate of PMA. That was in 1968. I don't know if the Air Force can still do the same buzzing today. Malaysian Police. Look at the capability of the Malaysian Police. Malaysian Coast Guard also. They have a very big coastline with 2 major islands. Here are examples of the kind of Coast Guard ships that they have. And let's look at Indonesia, the largest country in our region. A modest army with 233,000 regulars for a country with a population of 250 million. But they have 103 state-of-the-art Leopard 2 main battle tanks. They have 275 light tanks made in France. They have 90 light tanks Scorpion made in the United Kingdom. And other infantry military vehicles. And the Navy, they have 3 submarines under construction, 2 submarines in service. They have frigates, 2 from the Netherlands, 2 from the Netherlands also. They have corvettes from the Royal Brunei, corvettes from other countries. And the Air Force is becoming more powerful. They have 5 Sukhoi 27, they have 11 Sukhoi 30, they have 10 F-16 and 5 F-15CD Block 32. That's the Indonesian police and the Indonesian Coast Guard. And finally, let's look at Singapore, with a population of only 5.4 million, around 1/20th of our 100 million population. Singapore, 72,000 regulars, 500,000 reserves. But look at the kind of military equipment that they have. 196 Leopard 2 main battle tanks. A total of 857 mechanized infantry combat vehicles. They have multiple rocket launchers. And they have the HIMARS also. Submarines, they have 4 submarines in service. They have the latest frigates. These are the envy of the Philippine Navy. Imagine, they have Lafayette class frigates, 6 of them. State of the art, the Singapore Navy. They have 6 corvettes. And during the search for the AirAsia crash, they were able to display the kind of equipment that they have. Imagine the search operation using very modern equipment like this AUV and SOV, the remotely operated vehicles, and that's why they were the ones who were able to find the fuselage of the aircraft. And the Air Force, they have 151 assorted fixed-wing combat aircraft, 32 F-15SG, 22 F-16C Block 52. I think the Air Force people are very familiar with that. Block 52. 20 F-16D Block 52. 20 F-16D Block 52. And on order, several F-35. Of course, they have a very modern police force. Look at the police force. And Coast Guard is very modest because they have a very short coastline. Now, Singapore has 72,000 regular soldiers, 500,000 in reserve, 196 Leopard tanks, 18 HIMARS, 400 modern howitzers, 4 submarines, 6 stealth frigates, 6 corvettes, and 151 fighter jets, many of them Block 52 F-16. Now, which country would dare invade tiny Singapore with that kind of firepower? And in the Philippines, has 4 submarines, 6 stealth frigates, 6 corvettes, 151 fighter jets, many of them Block 52 F-16s. Do you think China would grab Mischief Reef and Scarborough Shoal and continue bullying us? I don't need to show the Philippines Army, Navy, Air Force, Police, and Coast Guard assets to make a comparison. We all know that. And now, how do you feel? Envious? Low morale? But it wasn't like that before. We compared well with them decades ago. Now, let me take you to a trip back to 1966, the year I entered PMA, the year I entered Annapolis with big dreams about a career in the service and about the country, just like all of you at the time you entered the academy. Let's look at the economic situation in 1966 in terms of GDP per capita for the Philippines compared to other countries and see how things changed in only 4 years after. In 1970, the year I graduated, I'm using data from the World Bank. This was how it looked per capita GDP in 1966. The Philippines, $202 per capita. China was only half of our per capita that time. Japan was, of course, ahead with about 1,000. Indonesia was only 1/4 of our per capita that time, $55. Malaysia was ahead, 345. Singapore, way ahead at 567. And South Korea was almost half of our per capita in 1966. By the way, it's not correct to say that we were the number 2 economic power during that time because Malaysia and Singapore were already ahead of us. But in just 4 years' time, this was what happened. Philippines went down to 189 from 202. China still struggling, still way below us. Japan, oh, way ahead. But Indonesia, in just 4 years, if you look at the figures here, was able to catch up, almost catch up, $182. Malaysia, still way ahead, 392. Singapore, way ahead, about 4 times our per capita. And South Korea, in just 4 years, was able to overtake the Philippines in only 4 years. Now let's fast forward from 1971 to 1979. These were the martial law years. 1971 to 1979, Philippines is still ahead of China. 203 against 117. Indonesia a little ahead already of the Philippines. Malaysia way ahead. Singapore way ahead. And South Korea about 50% ahead of the Philippines at the start of the decade 1971. After 10 years, martial law years were very good for the Philippines because from 203, our per capita went up 3 times to 601, as you can see from the board. China is still struggling. 1/3, less than 1/3 of our per capita in 1979. But Indonesia went a little ahead of us. Singapore way ahead. Malaysia way ahead. And South Korea about 3 times our per capita income at that time. Next decade would be the 80s. Now the 80s, you know what happened in the 80s. We started in 1980 at 744. In 1983, Senator Aquino was assassinated from 744. If you can see from the chart there, we went down to 652, 620, down to 591. Then after the EDSA revolution, it went up to 641. And in 1989, we ended up at 785. But we were still ahead of China. China was a poor 313 in 1980 and only 408 in 1989. Indonesia went down because of the Pertamina scandal. They were ahead of us for a while, but Indonesia's economy went down to about 573. Malaysia all the way up. Singapore was already more than 10 times the per capita income of the Philippines. South Korea was about 6 times the per capita income of the Philippines. Now let's look at 1990 to 1999, and as we all know, a Cavalier was the President of the Republic during that time. 1990, 796, we were more than double the per capita income of China. China remained very poor during this period. Indonesia below us, Malaysia way ahead, Singapore more than 13 times our per capita, South Korea more than 7 times our per capita income. In 1999, at the end of those 10 years, we went up to about 1,000. We went down a little after 1997 because of the Asian currency crisis. China is still down. Indonesia below us at the end of 1999. Malaysia way ahead. Singapore way ahead, about 22 times our per capita. And South Korea more than 10 times our per capita. And now the year of the 2000 already. This is the year, this is the period where China rose. And you can see here, year 2000, our per capita was 1,055 against China's 941. But in 10 years' time, Philippines went up slightly to 1,851, but China zoomed up to $3,800 ahead already of the Philippines. Indonesia, from lower than the Philippines in 2000, went higher than the Philippines in 2009. So Indonesia was able to overtake us. This was the decade. From a per capita GDP lower than that of the Philippines in 2000, China went up to more than double that of the Philippines by 2009. Indonesia, from being behind, overtook the Philippines. Singapore and Korea continued rising. And now let's look at 2010 up to 2013. Philippines up slowly. During this 4-year period, our economy went up by 29%, measured by per capita GDP. But China went up more than double that, 53%. Japan went down a little bit because of the recession there. Indonesia is now 3,400, way higher than the per capita of the Philippines. Singapore is way above at $55,000 compared to our 2,700. South Korea at $25,000, almost 10 times our per capita income. And I'm showing the US here so that we can have a perspective of how the US per capita compares with China. China is getting higher, but still way behind the per capita income of the US. $53,000 for the US and only $6,800 for China. But with a population of 1.3 billion, that translates into a very big total GDP. Now, question, did things change? The Philippines compared to other countries? And let's see the following chart so that we can make a better comparison on a decade-by-decade basis. And also this line chart here. And you will note in the line chart that in the year 1966, when I entered Annapolis, all these countries here were almost clustered, almost very close together. But look what happened over the years. Singapore's, this is the blue line, Singapore's per capita that's Singapore. It went up even higher than the United States, but we were so close to them in 1966. Here is the Philippines, way below. That is Indonesia, and this is China. China's breakthrough started in the year 2000, and this is Malaysia here, and this is Korea. And as I said, in Singapore, this is the United States. This green line here is Japan, which slumped a little because of their own recession. And this is all better show how the comparative economic performance from 1966 to 2013, a period of 47 years, less than 2 generations. From 1966 to 2013, increase in per capita income. Philippines, 13 times. China, 66 times. Japan, 36 times. Indonesia, 63 times. Malaysia, 30 times. Singapore, 97 times. South Korea, 199 times. Now, are you still surprised why South Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, and tiny Singapore are light years ahead of us in defense and security capability? Say, for example, you graduate at the same time, and after 40 years, your reunion, your salary increased by 13 times, and your classmate's salary increased by 199 times, or just 97 times, or just 63 times, or even just 30 times compared to your 13 times. Who can buy a bigger house in a more secure, more peaceful community? Who can build a higher, stronger wall? Who can hire security guards for his or her family? Who can provide better peace and security for his or her family? Who can afford more lawyers to defend the family? It is not just the desire, but the purchasing power. Look at China, a very poor country when I graduated in 1970. Is still a very poor country when our outstanding achievement awardees, Cavalier Katapang, Cavalier Millan, Cavalier Delgado, and Cavalier Echeverri graduated in 1981, still poor in 1982 and 1983. And when our young MCs, Cavalier Salgado and Cavalier Santiago, graduated in 1995 and 1997, China was still poor at that time with a GDP per capita lower than that of the Philippines. But to illustrate, this was Shenzhen in 1981, a city near Hong Kong, very rural with a population of only around 30,000. This was the year when Cavalier Katapang graduated from PMA. But look at Shenzhen now, today. See how it got transformed from the time that Cavalier Katapang graduated in 1981. Nearly 10 million people live and work here, from only 30,000 in the 80s. Shenzhen has become a modern metropolis, a major manufacturing hub for the world. Not only did the population rise, not only did income per person soar, but also people's lives clearly and fundamentally changed. So what's the bottom line? In 1992, a powerful political slogan was used in the US and it won the election. It's the economy is stupid. But I won't say that. I'll be more polite. It's the economy, sir, ma'am. For example, in external defense, particularly the defense of our West Philippine Sea, we can debate what to use. Whether more white ships for the Philippine Coast Guard, or stealth frigates for the Navy, or multi-role fighters for the Air Force, or go asymmetric with land-based missiles and small missile boats. But the bottom line is still, how can we increase our national purchasing power? What can we afford? How big is our economy? So whose fault is it that we have fallen behind? Our presidents, cabinets, the economic managers, Congress, businessmen, armed forces of the Philippines, police, local governments, the people, us. Let's not go into a bitter blame game, like we shouldn't blame our parents for our failed dreams. Let's look forward. I say we have to double time on our economy. Last January 4, the Central Bank Governor was our Rotary Club of Manila guest speaker, and he announced our economy would grow by 7 to 8% this year. Quite impressive. This would keep us among the region's strongest economies. But where would a 7 to 8% growth take us? The rule of 70 of economy says, you divide 70 by the growth rate in order to find out how long it would take for the economy to double. 70 divided by 7 to 8%. So if we sustain 7 to 8%, our economy would double in 8 to 10 years. 8 to 10 years. That is still a long way from growing 66 times like China, or 63 times like Indonesia, or 97 times like Singapore, or 199 times like South Korea. But that will be a good growth, nonetheless, better than in most of the past 47 years. It's the economy, sir, ma'am. and we all have a shared responsibility. The AFP and the police to make the peace and order situation more conducive to economic growth. We still have an extreme poverty rate of around 20%. And most of that extreme poverty is happening in areas where there is insurgency. And there is insurgency in those areas because the economy there is bad. A vicious cycle that we must overcome. According to the UN, extreme poverty means an income of $1.25 per day, or less than 60 pesos per day. Around 20 million Filipinos are extremely poor. During my 18 years in Congress, I always asked the leaders of the AFP and the police to justify their budget in terms of how every peso of their budget can help grow the economy. Not just by protecting the peace, not just by protecting our vital economic installations, but through employment generation and as a major buyer of locally made goods, equipment, and services. The Coast Guard is there to protect our vital economic assets in the seas, people, ships and their cargoes, and of course, the seas as vast economic resource. We should ask all public officials, from the President to every cabinet member, and we have 2 cabinet members here, down to the bureau and division levels, not just the so-called economic team like NEDA, DBM, Department of Finance, that all of them should become economic managers, always mindful of how their policies and projects and decisions help boost or stunt the economy. We all are economic managers in our own way. Studies in the World Bank, the UN, and the academia have shown how education, health, infrastructure, social welfare, environment, local governance, etc. impact the economy, and vice versa. We Cavaliers, whatever our status now, have a role to play, whether former President, generals, admirals, brand new lieutenants and ensigns, active or retired, senators, congressmen, cabinet members, governors, mayors, big businessmen, and the small entrepreneurs, managers. Cavaliers are all over, in all human endeavors that impact the economy. Many of us are in business, many have become captains of industries, entrepreneurs, and should work hard to help make the Philippines more globally competitive. Cavaliers know the meaning of competitiveness more than many folks. We made it to PMA through competitive exams, not because of a gift. We made it through the academy by competing hard. The economy is growing, but it's not growing fast enough. We have 2 high-growth areas, OFWs and BPOs, and I know many Cavaliers are in those fields. Some are even OFWs. Some are ICT experts and ICT entrepreneurs. Look at the OFW sector. From 2001 to 2012, rising to about 10.4 million OFWs, contributing more than $21 billion inward remittances per year. Look at the BPO industry. 900,000 employees already at the end of 2013. And look at what they're contributing. Employment of 900,000 and annual revenue already reaching $13 billion, growing at about 17%. It is projected that in 2 to 3 years' time, the BPO IT sector will overtake the OFW sector. We now take pride in being the number 4 largest shipbuilding country of the world. Look what we can make. This is one of the largest ships in the world, made in the Philippines. But that's not enough. We need to catch up fast. We need to tell our leaders and ourselves to dream bigger and move faster. We have to double time. The average GDP per capita in the world is around $12,000. That's the average, $12,000. Ours is less than $3,000 as of 2013. We are still a long way to go to become even just average. And this Cavalier in this hall and those outside must do his and their share to lead in the quest for lasting peace and security by addressing the larger, deeper issue, the very reason why we are behind in peacekeeping and security assets. It's the economy, sir, ma'am. We must all help to dramatically and spectacularly boost our economy, the way our neighbor countries did to catapult them to the economic, military, peace and security heights that they are in now, which heights we envy so much. So that, like Singapore, we can have a better life and buy, among others, at least 4 submarines, 6 stealth frigates, 6 corvettes, and 151 fighter jets, many of them Block 52 F-16s, missile boats and land-based missiles, and tell China to scram and get out of the West Philippine Sea. Let that envy be a reason not to grieve lost chances and past failures, but to motivate us to wake up and do better this time. Double time, Cavaliers! Wake up, Philippines! Double time, Philippines! Maraming salamat. Thank you so much.
Please be seated. I hope, sir, that before I